One, two, one, two. Good morning. Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Cincinnati. My name is Reverend Connie Simon. Our urban community welcomes all with love, supports learning and growth, serves our wider community, and works for justice, equity, and inclusion. We're glad you're here this morning. If you'd like more information about our community or its work, please email us at member-care@firstuu.com. We light our chalice, the chosen symbol of our faith, with these words by Judith Quarles. At this hour, in small towns and big cities, in single rooms and ornate sanctuaries, many of our sibling Unitarian Universalist congregations are also lighting a flaming chalice. As we light our chalice today, let us remember that we are a part of a great community of faith. May this dancing flame inspire us to fill our lives with the Unitarian Universalist ideals of love, justice, and truth.
On December 5th, 2020, over 50 households from the First Unitarian Church of Cincinnati, or about 1/4 of our membership, gave of their time and resources for our December donation drive, a stand-in for our annual mitten tree ceremony and collection for Project Connect. By the end of the day, we had filled up 2 vehicles worth of gifts for homeless children in the Cincinnati public school system, and 3 oversized bags worth of winter wear for the children at South Avondale Elementary. This is an example of our congregation at its best. We are also at our best when we work towards dismantling systems of oppression within our walls. I wonder, though, what roadblocks do you see to that work?
Thank you all for your many contributions to our donation drive this winter. At a time when the pandemic consumes all of our news and politics is right up there still, the election just won't go away, it's easy to forget sometimes that it's Christmas and that no matter what else is going on in the world, there are still children who are looking forward to finding something under the tree. Even though this year parents are facing economic challenges and time challenges, and to stay physically distant, we can't go out and shop like we ordinarily would. Still, let us remember the joy of the season and remember to help ignite that spark of joy in a child's eyes. At this time of year, our Jewish siblings are also celebrating Hanukkah. And we help celebrate Hanukkah with them through this prayer, Each Candle a Miracle, by Amanda Udis Kessler. We light the Hanukkah candles in wonder, joy, and gratitude, each candle a miracle. When the Holy Temple was rededicated at the time of the Maccabean liberation battle, only 1 day's worth of oil remained, yet it burned for 8 days, so we light candles in remembrance. We rededicate ourselves to the miracle of light in a season of darkness, to the miracle of trust in a time of anxiety, to the miracle of hope in a time of despair, to the miracle of faith in a time of cynicism. We rededicate ourselves to the miracle of wholeness in a time of fracture, to the miracle of courage in a time of fear, to the miracle of resistance in a time of oppression, to the miracle of peace in a time of violence. And in a time of hatred, we rededicate ourselves to the miracle of love. That miracle of love is one that is so all-consuming and so powerful. And that's why each week we take this time to honor the joys and sorrows that have happened in our congregation since last we were together, that we may share love with one another. We know that in our world many people are in sorrow, in despair. They're suffering from illness, from economic hardship. Even in our own congregation, we face loss and sadness. For all those who are in sorrow, we drop a stone in our water. At this time, we also know that there are people celebrating great joys. The joys of new parents in our midst. The joys of those who have recovered from illness, who have gotten a new job, who have seen their way through some struggle. For all of those joys, we drop a stone in our water. For those we have named, for those whose names we do not know, and for those whose names are carefully guarded in our hearts, we drop one more stone in the water, that the healing power of the water may soothe their sorrows and amplify our joys. Please join me now in a moment of silent meditation, reflection, or prayer while we look at the beautiful picture this morning of a flower donated by Lynn Martin. Lynn chose this flower in honor of her mother, Carol, who celebrates her 94th birthday on December 17th. The Rocky Mountain columbine is the state flower of Colorado, a place Lynn's mother especially loves. Each month, we designate a particular cause for our Share the Plate. This month, as I mentioned last week, we're having an abbreviated Share the Plate period dedicated to our staff. Between the December 1st and Tuesday, December 15th, I encourage you to contribute to this special collection. The funds received will be given to staff as a Christmas present and symbol of our love and commitment to them. I'm pleased to announce that these presents will be focused on our teachers. Each of them has been affected in their other jobs by the pandemic, and we hope that this extra assistance will come in handy, not only because it's the holiday season, but also because we don't know what, if any, government assistance is forthcoming. To contribute to this fund, you can text GIVE to 513-713-7373. You can click Give in Breeze. You can visit our website, firstuu.com, or mail a check to First Unitarian Church of Cincinnati, 536 Linton Street, Cincinnati, Ohio, 45219. Be sure to write staff in the memo line. Thank you. In support of our congregation and of those beyond these walls, the morning offering will be gratefully received. If this is your first time visiting, please feel free to let the virtual plate pass you by. We are grateful for your presence.
for us there exists, as there did not exist for our ancestors, a regularly constituted agency for common action. We call it the Unitarian Universalist Association. Sometimes, perhaps when we are tired and exasperated, we think of it as a distant bureaucracy, and we berate it as though it were something alien that has somehow been saddled on us. Sometimes, in a more reasonable mood, we recognize that it is there to serve us, not merely with things like hymn books and religious educational materials, but also with established and responsible agencies for the very same consultation among the churches that the Cambridge Platform insisted was a necessary aspect of the fellowship of the churches. But the UUA is something more than an agency to serve us. In some respects, it is actually ourselves, and it provides an organ through which we may state from time to time the consensus that prevails among us, so that the waywardness of particular churches may, if necessary, be rebuked, though not coerced by the opinion of the whole. This is one of the things that the fellowship of the churches means, that the local church, while it is free to make its own decisions, is bound to make its decisions responsibly, with a decent respect for the considered judgment of the whole. Can two walk together except they be agreed? Yes and no. How much diversity a church can tolerate without losing its sense of direction is a delicate question, not to be decided by abstract analysis. But consensus does not have to mean conformity. Diversity need not mean surrender to the arrogance of those who insist that tolerance means that others must tolerate them, no matter how rigid and dogmatic they may be. There is much ground between these extremes. That is where we belong, seeking a straight way for ourselves, our children, and our children's children.
We're continuing our discussion of widening the circle of concern this month by focusing on the section entitled Congregations and Communities. I understand that many of you may not have read the report. Perhaps your days are filled with working and homeschooling your kids at the same time and you just don't have the time to read, or perhaps you don't have a copy of the report. If that's the case, let me know. We can get you one. Or maybe you just don't want to read it. For whatever reason, many of you have not read this report. So during these sermons, I've tried to give you a summary of each section, along with some of my personal reflections and research. The Congregations and Communities section of the report begins, as do all the others, with some assertions. First, that real-time, face-to-face congregations matter, even with all the challenges to maintain them, and in a time when church-going is less valued by many in younger generations. Though we see how much can be accomplished virtually, we also see the value of face-to-face experiences, which are more accessible especially for those with limited technological resources or financial resources. Second, that we will also need to support alternative and virtual communities in order to ensure the survival of communal associations, especially for younger Unitarian Universalists and Unitarian Universalists of color and those living in areas where less mainstream identities are less common. I did some checking. The number of UU congregations in our associations is dropping. In just 2012, there were 1,054 certified congregations, meaning that they filed an annual report with the association. In 2020, that number was down to 1,027. The number of congregants has held fairly steady at around 152,000, but that's only because of rapid growth in our more progressive congregations and regions. The number of religious education enrollments dropped during that same period from 53,776 to 34,768. Why is this happening? And what does this say about us? The report states that multicultural congregations are on the rise and that progressive-minded, working-age adults expect the basic practices of equity, inclusion, and diversity that many of our congregations currently lack. How is that possible? Don't we all believe in the first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every being? Of course we do. Well, we say we do. I hope we do. However, we might not always be walking our walk and talking our talk in all of our congregations. As part of the Commission's work, it conducted a number of interviews and collected testimony from UUs, particularly biracial, indigenous, LGBTQ, and UUs of color. I think I want to read to you some of the submitted testimony. It's important that you hear this. Quote, "In a city that is predominantly people of color, your church did not have any speakers of color in 2017 other than you." Quote, "Your church board does not have a person of color or even someone from a multiracial family. The all-white board is selected by an all-white nominating committee, which in turn selects the all-white board year after year." Quote, "I wish more of my people looked like me. For that reason, I fear that I may always feel a little bit like an outsider. I will explain it to you in the following way. It's quite obvious to me that the UU setting is a sanctuary for gay, lesbian, transgender, and bisexual people. It is not as obvious that it is for people of color." Quote, "I am an African American woman who has been a UU for over 30 years. I have experienced instances of microaggressions at the local, regional, and national levels. Some examples. 1, the number of times white people clutched their purses closer when I sat next to them at General Assembly. Another, during the bidding on a vacation in Puerto Rico at the church auction, a member inquired about the capacity and another member shouted out, it was Puerto Rico, so there could be 22 to a room. Another one, at my very first meeting of a now dissolved district board, a minister made a joke about 4/5 of a person. No one challenged him. During another gathering involving a tour, a member of the host congregation who was acting as a docent asked me if I'd ever tried wearing a yoke that was being displayed. I left the premises. The professional leader spoke with the person who cried. All of the other members of the gathering said nothing. These aren't experiences from the 1960s or 70s. These are things that are happening now, today, in the last couple of years. What does this say about us as Unitarian Universalist congregations? According to the Commission, it says our association needs to develop and support leadership that brings needed change. We can't put all that responsibility on individual congregational leaders. It's too much. They need the support of our Association of Congregations, the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations. During candidating week, way back in 2018 BC, before COVID, the search committee set up 41 separate events for me, opportunities for us to get to know one another. I would estimate that in 30 out of those 41 events, someone mentioned how I would bring diversity to this congregation. I heard it so many times that I felt compelled to address it in my sermon the day you voted on my candidacy. Do you remember that? I know some of you out there who are members probably only remember the advice I got from one young member who said that to be successful here, I should not cut people with a knife. But what I said about diversity was, with my presence, I can't automatically fix whatever racial issues you think may or may not exist here at First U or in the city, nor can I magically diversify the congregation by my presence. Those are things that we will work on together. And we are working on those things together. Through Opening Hearts, a joint initiative of the Board of Trustees and the ministry, through our Lifespan Faith Development offerings for adults and children, and we still have work to do. Listen to this testimony collected by the Commission. We've gone from focusing on diversity, just trying to get diverse people into the congregation, to inclusion, which is to find ways to, welcome and include diverse people in our congregation to a greater understanding. That it's not enough to welcome people into our playgrounds, our congregation. We need to focus on racial equity and really, really seek out the voices of those who have not been present in our congregations. People from marginalized groups, especially in terms of race, and really begin to co-create with people from those marginalized groups to create. We're doing the work. We're doing it. Some of us are moving faster than others, and some are moving slower, and that's okay. When you were back in school, wasn't there always that one subject that came easier to you than the others? Same thing. Some of us are having a more difficult time with this than others. Don't worry. No one will be left behind unless you want to be. The Commission noted that the culture of many congregations is not keeping pace with the expectations of new generations for anti-oppression practices. If we want to grow as a faith, if we want to survive as a faith movement, we must reform at the congregational level. The Commission further states that those who have long been entrenched in our congregations believe that this kind of work is not useful. It's simply a form of political correctness or is not of value for them. Longtime congregational leaders may not see patterns of white privilege, institutional racism, and other oppressions that can be present in our congregations. They may not see the ways that a changing world is asking that Unitarian Universalism be accountable to all the diversity of people in our congregations and communities. I'll sum that up this way. You can't change what you won't acknowledge. I had what I called a crisis of institutional faith back in 2017. I wasn't even sure that I was going to go forward with ministry or stay in this denomination. My personal theology wasn't shaken. It was as strong as ever. But my faith in the institution of Unitarian Universalism was. I wasn't sure that Unitarian Universalism really wanted me, or people who look like me, or people who had marginalized identities. I heard a lot of talk, but the actions didn't support the talk. I saw too much defensiveness, too much, that's the way we've always done it, too much, why do you want to change what we've loved for so many years? Too much protest against efforts to dismantle white supremacy in this movement. I couldn't understand it. And here I was about to graduate from seminary. Had I made an awful mistake? And then, as I've told some of you before, Reverend Leslie Takahashi reminded me that this is my faith too. It's not theirs, and they don't have the power to put me or her out. My feelings weren't uncommon or unique, as you heard from the testimony I shared earlier. That's why the Commission stresses that it is urgent, absolutely urgent, that we recognize that those among the newer generations and marginalized identities represented in Unitarian Universalism have begun to lose hope that our congregations will ever choose to change. These communities and individuals are therefore less willing to continue to give of their time, their energy, their resources, and their emotional labor in order to do the work of teaching and leading for internal justice at the congregational level. They're tired. The people of color, the LGBTQ folks, the biracial folks, those who suffer from any type of oppression are not here to really be your teachers. They are here because they share this faith with you. That's why our member congregations must act both as independent bodies, as independent congregations and organizations, and in coordination, covenant, and community with other congregations. The UUA serves a central role as the facilitator of this communion. Miscommunication, distrust, or lack of understanding between the congregations and the UUA inhibits needed growth and transformation in our faith. Conversely, congregations must develop a covenantal understanding with one another and with the association, which is critical to the effectiveness of congregational polity. Congregational leaders may use the idea of polity to maintain an organization independence that discourages them from joining with other congregations in the work of equity and justice. And there's that word again, polity. We've been talking about it a lot lately, haven't we? Remember the Cambridge Platform, the foundation document for the way we relate to one another? We talked about the ways that it encourages us to make promises to one another, promises of how we want to be together. We talked last week about how it encourages us to settle when promises are broken, how we can reconcile with one another, and the understanding that sometimes when promises are broken and there is no effort to repair them, or the efforts to repair them are unsuccessful, that sometimes we must separate. Well, there's another thing that's in the Cambridge Platform. It talks about the responsibility of congregations to one another. that we are all interrelated and that we must aid one another. So I know sometimes we talk about such and such a church has so many members and this one doesn't have that many members, and we do things here this way and it has to be this way at this other congregation. What if we really embraced our covenant among congregations? Yes, it's true that our polity does lift up the authority of the individual congregation, but that's not all. It speaks to the covenant among our member congregations. No one congregation goes it alone. No matter how much we might like to pretend that we do, no one congregation goes it alone. We work with one another in this faith. We need one another in this faith. The commission says, so often we talk about congregational polity and covenant as structure of organization and management for our movement, as if they are only our business model. And that has led to a culture of critique, which makes change processes tedious and often unwieldy. So what's the answer? Well, we need to continue doing our work at the local level, in this congregation and with others. For us, we are doing our opening hearts work, where we're looking at accessibility and inclusion, classism, LGBTQ bias, racism, and multiculturalism. We are identifying the biases that we each carry as individuals and working to quell those biases so that we can go out and do the work that the world needs. If we're not healthy internally, what on earth can we do to help others? Through our Opening Hearts initiative, we're also looking at the way we operate as a congregation and how we treat one another. Opening Hearts is a lot more than anti-racism and understanding what microaggressions are. Opening Hearts requires us to look at ourselves. Where are the people of color and biracial people and indigenous people and LGBTQ folks in our congregation? Are they involved in leadership? Are they members of the board? Are they members of the nominating committee? What about our vendors? Who do we work with? What about our investments in our endowment fund? What do we look at in terms of how we operate? It's more than just saying everybody's welcome to come in here on Sunday morning. It's whether we're really living into our principles. We also need to do our work with other congregations. The UU Council of Greater Cincinnati is leading an effort for individual member congregations to attend Beloved Conversations, an anti-oppression, anti-racism communications training that will begin next spring. Registration materials will come out in January. All of the congregations in this area, St. John's, Heritage, First Church, the Gathering at Northern Hills, as well as the two fellowships here, are all involved in this. We'll all be sending folks together because we know that this isn't just one congregation's work. We'll be joining people from hundreds of congregations nationwide who have already done this training, which has existed for years. But we will be doing that together. We also will keep working at the association level. We need to. The Commission recommends that the association prioritize workshops on covenants of right relationship for congregations and communities, and equip leaders on conflict facilitation and the promotion of equity. In our congregation, where we have been blessed to take advantage of some of that assistance, we can attest to the value of having a strongly prepared and strongly equipped regional staff. As an association, the Commission recommends that we must continue to prioritize efforts to create communication channels and strengthen regions, clusters, and other groups of structures in which congregations can live into true congregational polity, the lack of which has exacerbated conflicts and created unnecessary distractions from mission. That means supporting things like the Mid-America region and the UU Council of Greater Cincinnati. Together, we must affirm covenant and commitment, not comfort, as the binding fabrics of UU congregations and other communities. Our faith communities are not just available for those who fit in most easily or who make so much trouble that no one is willing to challenge them. New generations have even more discomfort with and lack of tolerance for this sort of culture and consider it toxic. Finally, we must develop a common frame of anti-oppression training and multicultural competency for all regional staff, those trained to advocate for UU professionals during times of conflict, and regional boards and entities to help prevent injury and wrongdoing. The Commission's research reveals that today we can barely speak to each other across generation and socioeconomic location. Terms such as white supremacy culture, have dramatically different meanings across generations. In today's world, it's easy to stay in our comfort zones with communities and communication channels designed to reinforce our opinions so that we have less and less common language among us. And that's true for Unitarian Universalists as well. Finally, the Commission states that we must enter into some negotiations to understand that while we may not use the same words to describe the issues, we must have a shared commitment to the work of building a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive faith. Those last words, all of those recommendations come from the Commission on Institutional Change for the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations. In how many of those recommendations did you hear things that are relevant and applicable to us here at First Unitarian Church of Cincinnati? To our cluster of congregations here in the city of Cincinnati? This is not work that we're doing alone. We aren't special. We aren't exempt from it. It is work that we all need to do. All of us as Unitarian Universalists, as individuals, as congregations, as clusters of congregations, and as an association of congregations. This is the work we must do if our faith is to survive. It is not easy, but it is necessary. May we all be committed to doing this hard work.
We all have sorrow.
extinguish our chalice by reciting the words that appear on your screen. Together we say, we extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. As we think about community today, congregations and communities, it feels important to me to recognize that communities don't just exist on the same time and plane. They don't just exist laterally. They also exist through time. And so today it felt appropriate to use some closing words by Reverend Annie Forster. As far as our love flows, as far as our hope grows, as far as our yearning goes, we are no farther one from another. Amen. Before we leave this space today, I have a few announcements that I'd like to share with you. Immediately after our service, please join us, the welcoming and membership team, for getting to know you. This is an opportunity for those who are interested in First Church or in Unitarian Universalism to come in and just meet us. I'll be there. We can talk about your questions and discuss any issues that you have. If you don't have access to this, please send a quick email to member-care@firstuu.com and we'll send you the info. Also, this week, as I mentioned, we are continuing our Widening the Circle of Concern discussion. We meet on Wednesday from 7 to 9 p.m. on Zoom. The conversation will be facilitated by Meredith Plummer, our Director of Lifespan Faith Development, and me, Reverend Connie Simon. If you don't have a copy of the book, of the report, and would like one, we have it available in print form as well as online as an e-report and as an audio file. All are free of charge. If you'd like a copy, please send an email to member-care@firstuu.com, or if you'd like the Zoom information on how to join us. Next, I want to remind you that we are going to have our traditional Christmas Eve service. Maybe not exactly in the same way. We will be celebrating on Zoom, and everyone is invited to send me a photograph or a quick video or an audio file of you wishing folks a Merry Christmas. We'll put them all together into the service. We'll also have opportunities for you to speak a very brief Christmas greeting to the rest of the congregation. That will happen on the 24th at 5 p.m. via Zoom, and watch for that announcement and information to come out.